share. Got to do all the pieces in all the right order. We're just catching up. Good for it. Let's make sure that close, that over. Big. Okay. Oh, and let's get to the top of the screen. Okay. All the technology is in place, and we will wait for just another second or two to see if anyone else logs in, either through Zoom or through the YouTube. As a reminder to everyone, if you're coming in through Zoom, I welcome your questions or comments. You can do so either by unmuting yourself, raise your hand if you just want to make sure, or you can just type things in chat. Likewise, if you are on YouTube, feel free to use the chat function there as well. Although I will warn you again, there is a delay on YouTube, which means it may take a little bit longer for me to catch up to your chat than it does if you were on Zoom. If you need the Zoom link, please contact me and I'll be more than happy to help you get set up with that. All right, well, that little introduction took care of the login time for everyone. So let's go ahead and get down to work. We are going to attempt to finish off the book of Job today. And yes, I know that we still have like 30 chapters to go, but obviously we're going to be working through excerpts. I just want you to get a feel for the main flow of the argument, which is expanded upon in every chapter by beautiful language and especially beautiful descriptions of life and the natural world. But unfortunately, I want to make sure we have enough time to continue the class next week with some other topics, and other material. So let's go ahead and work our way through this. And if you have questions because I left something out, please let me know. And if you have questions that I didn't leave out, but you think you might like more of, please go back and read the entirety of the book of Job. It is well worth your time. So picking up in chapter 11, after Job has just finished one more rebuke of his so-called friends, we get his second friend to respond to him. Then Zophar the Naamathite said and replied, "Is a multiple of words unanswerable? Must a loquacious person be right? Your prattle may silence men. You may mock without being rebuked and say, 'My doctrine is pure and I have been innocent in your sight.'" So he's basically saying, look, all very well and good, Job. You're speaking eloquently. You're making some wonderful points and arguments, but that doesn't mean you're right, and doesn't mean that you're innocent. You must be guilty because you are being punished. You are suffering. But would that God might speak and talk to you himself. So I may not be able to answer you perfectly, although he tries. But if God could answer you, boy, could he explain it perfectly, tell you exactly what you did and why your punishment is the perfect, appropriate amount of punishment. That's what seems to be coming here. If God could only talk to you, he would tell you the secrets of wisdom, for there are many sides to sagacity, and know that God has overlooked for you some of your iniquity. Would you discover the mystery of God? Would you discover the limit of the Almighty? Higher than heaven, what can you do? Deeper than Sheol, what can you know? Look, Job, I know you sound smart, but really you're nothing compared to God. And if God were here, God could explain the entire calculation to you of everything that's happening and what you've done that disturbed it. If anything, God has overlooked some of your iniquity. I mean, after all, we know God is patient. So really, you think you're in a position to challenge God for being unfair, for being unjust? That is the back and forth through most of the center of the book of Job, so that's why we're only going to be doing a few excerpts. Then Job said in reply, "Indeed, you are the voice of the people, and wisdom will die with you. Oh, you're so smart. When you die, no one will be as wise anymore. But I, like you, have a mind, and am not less than you. I'm no dummy, right? Just because you've got your speeches doesn't mean I have to bow before you. Who does not know such things? I have become a laughingstock to my friend, one who calls to God and is answered, blamelessly innocent. a laughingstock. People are mocking me for my suffering and my refusal to accept it as fair. In the thought of the complacent, there is contempt for calamity. It is ready for those whose foot slips. Robbers live untroubled in their tents, and those who provoke God are secure, those whom God's hands have produced. All right, so this begins a whole section of Job where he is not just complaining about the unfairness to himself. He is also complaining that it is unfair that the wicked get away scot-free, that they do not seem to suffer the same kind of punishment that he is undergoing. That if they were suffering, if robbers were not untroubled in their tents, then Job would begin to understand the potential fairness of his situation. But no, he looks around, and the platitudes that you are giving, those are the platitudes of the complacent, of those for those that are in calamity, meaning you're sitting comfortable saying, well, you know, nothing bad's happened to me, so that proves God is fair. And yeah, if you're suffering, then I guess you must be being punished. The only people who say that are people who have not yet felt the sharpest pangs of suffering. And it is smug, and it is self-righteous, and it is insulting, because we can all see that many who are wicked are doing just fine. And then he continues in chapter 13 to go back to the first question about talking to God. Indeed, I would speak to the Almighty. I insist on arguing with God. But you invent lies. All of you are quacks. If you would only keep quiet, it would be considered wisdom on your part. Hear now my arguments, listen to my pleading. Will you speak unjustly on God's behalf? Will you speak deceitfully for him? Will you be partial toward him? Will you plead God's cause? Will it go well when he examines you? Will you fool him as one fools men? Incredibly powerful response from Job here. And anybody who has ever been in pain, who has listened to the annoying prattle of those that would try to offer words of comfort, but instead bring only more misery, they understand what Job is saying here. It's like, look, I'll talk to God because maybe God can give me answers, but the answers you're giving me are false. They are lies. They are not what God has in mind. And for you to act like you can be God's lawyer, you can be God's advocate, when you don't even understand what's really going on or happening, how dare you? How dare you do so? It would have been better if you kept your mouth shut. And I will 100% agree on that. That our first instinct is often to offer words of consolation that we imagine might be useful to a person going through suffering. And most of the time, when we are trying to come up with some ready platitude to give to somebody that's going through trouble, we give them the worst possible version. I'm going to read a section from Brachot, from the Talmud here, that talks about this, along with many other points. And then I'll give you a story from early in my rabbinic career. Rabbi Zera said, the reward for attending the lecture is for running, meaning you don't get reward just because you were brilliant as a student. You get a reward because you were eager as a student. If you ran to hear the words of Torah, that's where you get your reward. God does not only reward those that happen to have a particular aptitude. Therefore, the reward comes from the effort. Likewise, Abaye said, the reward for attending the Kala, a huge symposium, is for the crowding. It's kind of crowded and uncomfortable. Nobody really likes being there because of the crush. But the fact that you put up with that, that is where the reward comes from, even if you didn't follow every line that the presenter was giving, every nuance of the subtle interpretation of Torah. The fact that you put up with it, that is where your reward comes. The reward comes from the effort. Rava said, the reward for learning the halachic traditions is for the logical analysis. A little more subtle here. It's not just that when you learn halakha, specifically the oral tradition of Rabbi so-and-so said such and such, it's not just that you've learned that. The true reward is that you are learning to understand the process of understanding. that it is shaping your mind more than just adding another file to your memory. And here's the one that's most appropriate for today. Rav Papa said, the reward for attending a house of mourning is for the silence, meaning you get reward as somebody doing a mitzvah of visiting somebody that is in mourning. You get reward for showing up and keeping your mouth shut. You don't need to say anything to do the mitzvah. You just need to show up. And in fact, the silence that you bring, allowing the mourner to lead the conversation. If they wish to discuss or dwell on topics, you can follow their lead. But just showing up is where you have earned the mitzvah. Don't think that you are required to say some magic words in order to help them. Indeed, this is where early in my rabbinic career, I would cite this when I would visit a house of Shiva. And one time I went very heavy on this theme of just be here for those that mourn, let them take the lead, and don't try to come up with some fancy words or explanation about their grief. Don't say, well, at least they didn't suffer, or at least it was quick, or at least it was a long time, so you had time to say goodbye, or all the other things that people try to say to somehow make it feel better. It's not going to work during Shiva. It might work long-term, maybe, and when we get into some of our texts next week and the following week from the Talmud, we'll see that it is a little bit more nuanced than that. But short-term, nobody wants to be told your suffering isn't as acute as you think it is, because they are suffering. So shut up and be there. And when I finish giving the sermon, a little bit more eloquently than that, I try not to be too blunt sometimes, especially in a Shiva house. One of the people who had come to offer consolation came up and thanked me because she said that in the previous year, she had lost a child. And the things that people said were so aggravating, so exacerbating of her grief. She said the worst was that when someone came to her during the Shiva, in the literal 7 days after the passing and burial of their child, that someone came and said, oh, I know how you feel. I just lost my dog. Now, I'm somebody that loves animals. I love pets, and I have shed many tears over their passing. But to have the audacity to compare the grief at the loss of a pet to the loss of a child, and to think that will make the mourner feel better at that moment, well, you had to just, you're being a friend of Job there. You have completely confused your job. Your job is to come and offer presence, and your job is to come and offer a receptacle to whatever it is the mourner wishes to say or engage with. And just being silent is often the best thing. It's certainly where you should start, rather than coming up with some Jobian friend explanation of why the grief is perfectly fine and natural and God is wonderful. And I don't understand why you're crying, because that's just not going to work. Let me just finish the other three from this section because they're also worth knowing. And if you can remember this little set of aphorisms, you'll be in good shape. Mar Zutra said, the reward for fasting is for the charity. You don't get mitzvah points just for denying yourself food. You get mitzvah points for being inspired during the process of fasting to give tzedakah to those that are in need. And it is ultimately the tzedakah that is getting you more merit in the eyes of God than just the deprivation of food. And Isaiah 58 goes into that in a much more blunt detail. Rav Sheshet said, the reward for a eulogy is to raise their voices, meaning the eulogy itself is meant to help heighten the grief. Many times, and in some moderation, it's fine, but many times people will see a eulogy as an opportunity to come up with the funniest stories from the deceased's life. Now, some of those stories that are funny absolutely help us encapsulate the personality of the deceased, and it makes us feel more acutely their absence, and that moves us to mourn them. But really, mourning them is the purpose of the eulogy. I know that as modern Americans, nobody wants to feel sad, and we try to avoid that as much as possible, whether through distraction, medication, or just ignoring the issues. But Judaism says it is our gift to those that have passed to mourn their passing, to feel sorrow at their absence. And while we will certainly retell those funny stories for the rest of our lives and remember the fullness of who they were and what they meant. At the moment of grief, don't try to paper over grief with only the happy things. Allow yourself to be moved to tears at someone's loss. And finally, Rav Ashi said, the reward for participating in a wedding is for the words. It's not about the gift that you bring. It's not about how well you dance. It is for the blessing that you offer to the bride and groom as they are about to embark on their life. And there, you need to just give the most effusive and wonderful praise to the two of them and hopes for their future. Thus the Talmud, and we'll be coming back to Brachot actually next week, but not if we don't finish Job first. Okay. Another friend responds, and you'll see we're going to go back and forth quickly through excerpts of these different conversations. Eliphaz the Temanite said in reply, does a wise man answer with windy opinions and fill his belly with the east wind? Meaning, sound and fury, you're not really saying much. Should he argue with useless talk, with words that are of no worth? The wicked man rides in torment all his days. Few years are reserved for the ruthless. Bad people die young. Wicked people suffer. Frightening sounds fill his ears. When he is at ease, a robber falls upon him. He is never sure he will come back from the dark. A sword stares him in the face, for he has raised his arm against God and played the hero against the Almighty. Well, bad people suffer all the time, right? If you're wicked, you writhe in torment. And if you're wicked, you die young. And Job is still staring at him like, have you looked at the world? That does not seem to be what actually happens. How dare you say that? And again, how offensive to me who is suffering, that what you are saying is that all of my suffering is due to my sins. Once again, you go back to the first couple chapters, we know from God's perspective that Job is not a sinful man. And that is the ultimate pain throughout all of this, is we can be on Job's side unreservedly because the introduction of the whole story told us he does not deserve these punishments. Therefore, every time his friends are giving him words of consolation by saying, well, you know, wicked people get to suffer, so I guess that's what's happening. Every time they do that, we are having to flinch inside by saying, but that's not what's happening in the story. I don't understand what's happening in the story, but that's not what's happening. And that position is where we are going to eventually have to find reconciliation, but not before a few more exchanges. Let's jump ahead to 18, where Bildad tries to speak up. Will Earth's order be disrupted for your sake? Will rocks be dislodged from their place? Indeed, the light of the wicked fails. The flame of his fire does not shine. The light in his tent darkens. His lamp fails us. His iniquitous strides are hobbled, and so on and so forth. Bad stuff happens to bad people. I believe that is true. And again, because bad stuff happened to you, you must have been bad to deserve it. And Job responds, yet know that God has wronged me. He has thrown up siege works around me, attacked me. I cry violence, but am not answered. I shout, but can get no justice. This is at the heart of Job's ultimate frustration. And we'll see a few more before we get to some reconciliation, but this is at the heart of Job's frustration. He feels wronged. He feels aggrieved. This would be the equivalent of the government coming and taking your house and there being no reason. You were up on your taxes. You have committed no crime. All of your paperwork that shows your proper ownership is fair and valid, and yet they take it. And when you say violence, and you say this is wrong, they don't even answer. No one even shows up to say why they think they have justification for taking your house. And thus you shout, but get no justice. Not even an explanation, wrong though it may be. You get no answer at all. And that lack of answer is what is galling to Job. He is feeling as though he has been wronged, which we, the reader, know he has. But more importantly, he feels that he has been ignored, that all of his complaints are being answered by his friends with explanations that say God doesn't have to explain. God already explained. If bad stuff happened, you must be bad. And Job is saying that's not good enough because I know that's not true here. Therefore, answer me, show up. Do not ignore me. And anybody who's ever gone through a crisis, I imagine will sympathize with Job greatly. That one of the most frustrating things in a crisis, whether it be caused by someone else or whether it be a health issue or some other horrible problem, is to feel that you are unheard, that you are unseen, that your outrage at the unfairness is just ignored by everyone around you. How can the world keep going on like nothing is wrong when this is happening? And that pain is very real, and it's one of the reasons the book of Job is so powerfully poignant, especially to those who are in or who have gone through a crisis, because in Job they hear someone like themselves, and in the story they hear people like perhaps people they met who tried to explain, oh, it's your fault. Oh, your kids are hungry, you should work harder, get another job, you need to just be better with your money. Really? You think that's why it's happening? You think that's what created? You think my laziness is why my kids are hungry? Really? Nobody is willing to hear, nobody's willing to answer. All right, one more back and forth before we get to a fourth participant. Zophar the Naamathite said in reply, do you not know this, that from time immemorial, since man was set on earth, the joy of the wicked has been brief, the happiness of the impious fleeting. Though he grows as high as the sky, his head reaching the clouds, he perishes forever like his dung. All right. So little modifications says Zophar. Yeah, so you're right. Maybe the wicked do sometimes enjoy comfort and peace and prosperity, but eventually they'll be brought down. Right, so he's moving the goalposts here. It's not the wicked are always punished and the righteous are always rewarded. It's eventually the wicked are always punished and the righteous are always rewarded. And therefore you have no right to complain because, well, it just took a while to catch up to you. Right? Yes, you were living nicely for a while, but that is no indication of your previous piety. Maybe God was just stringing you along. And maybe the people that you're pointing to as deserving of punishment as well, more so or more obviously than you, they'll get theirs eventually. So this is another attempt to try and defend the justice of God by saying, oh, okay, fine. God's justice is not always instant. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't believe in it. They'll get theirs. And this is a platitude that many people will repeat to themselves or each other. What goes around comes around. As you reap, so you sow. Therefore, just keep going and understand that injustice will eventually all be fixed all by itself. And that is not the ultimate answer that we're going to get from Torah. And it's not even the ultimate answer we're going to get from this book. Because Job says in response in chapter 21, why do the wicked live on, prosper and grow wealthy? Their children are always with them. Remember, his died. And they see their children's children. Their homes are secure without fear. They do not feel the rod of God. They're not being punished. How seldom does the lamp of the wicked fail? Does the calamity they deserve befall them? Does he apportion their lot in anger? Let them become like straw in the wind, like chaff carried off by a storm. You say, God is reserving his punishment for his sons of the wicked. Let it be paid back to him, that he may feel it. Let his eyes see his ruin. Let him drink of the wrath of Shaddai, one of the other names of God. But what does he care about the fate of his family when his number of months run out? Job, very powerfully, says, you think the wicked care about their kids and that God is going to punish them by hurting their kids long after they've died? Have you not been keeping track of how the wicked behave? They don't act like they care what happens to their children, let alone grandchildren or great-grandchildren. Don't tell me God's justice comes multiple generations down the way. The person who did it, that's the one who should suffer. Why in the world would you think this is just? and fair. How can you think this defends the unfairness that I am experiencing? All right, that continues for much time, but we need to begin the conclusion of the book of Job. And to do so, we need to have a fourth character. This is a man by the name of Elihu, who is younger than the other participants. And as you'll see, he is very deferential, but he is going to begin to offer an answer, an explanation. Now, I have to warn you, if you haven't already read the book of Job or studied it in the past, you may be hoping for a very clear answer to all of Job's complaints throughout the book. You're not going to get it. No offense. I know that can make it feel very annoying because in modern literature, we like our self-help books to be neatly tied up with a bow. And we like all of the problems that we have been told we need to address to be addressed before we get to the final chapter. That's not going to happen here because we are moving away from an explanation to a relationship. That ultimately the answer to the book of Job, to all of Job's complaint, is not, here's why everything happened to you. Ultimately, the answer in the book of Job to everything that he is going through is stay connected to God. Now, we're going to come back to that in much more detail, but I have to give you that warning because many people who have worked their way through all of these 30-some chapters up to this point get a little annoyed that at the end of the book of Job, the answer they were waiting for, the answer to the preeminent question of Job throughout of why is this happening to me, does not get resolved. But that's, as we'll see, because there cannot be a simple answer to that question. But what there can be is a change in Job's perspective and his understanding of how to remain in relationship with God throughout the crisis. And that's what his friends have been missing throughout the entire time. They have been answering the primary question, why is this happening? And their primary answer is, because you deserve it. And that doesn't work because we know that's not right. And Job himself does not believe that's right. So now we have to change the dynamic. And it's going to take a couple chapters here, of which we have a few excerpts, for Elihu to help Job realize what he has been missing throughout. And it's not that he's wrong. It's not that he's a bad person. It's not that he deserves this. But let's get down to the work and see where we end up. Actually, let me take a quick sip of my tea. Or else I won't be able to keep talking. These three men ceased replying to Job, for he considered himself right. So they've all given up. Then Elihu, son of Barachel, the Buzite of the family of Ram, was angry. Angry at Job because he thought himself right against God. He was angry as well at his three friends because they found no reply, but merely condemned Job. Elihu waited out Job's speech, for they were all older than he. But when Elihu saw that the three men had nothing to reply, he was angry. All right. So Elihu is watching this argument and he's going, you know, Job, you're wrong because you think you're better than God. You think you know more than God. And that's wrong. But the three guys that have been talking, trying to answer you, all they've done is condemn you. They haven't actually tried to answer you. They've just condemned you. And I've been patient because I'm young and I'm not supposed to talk in front of my elders, but I can't stop anymore. So Elihu, the son of Barachel, the Buzite, said in reply, I have but few years, while you are old. Therefore I was too awestruck and fearful to hold forth among you. I thought, let age speak, let advanced years declare wise things. But truly, it is the spirit in men, the breath of Shaddai, that gives them understanding. It is not aged who are wise, the elders who understand how to judge. So this is a lovely little dig. He's like, I figured you're all old. You'll know how to answer him because with age comes wisdom. But man, it turns out that wisdom does not come with age. I guess people are wise just if God wants them to be wise because you people are old and dumb. So sort of the okay boomer response coming here. And nonetheless, he is the only one of the respondents to Job that helps Job get on the right track. But now, Job, listen to my words. You and I are the same before God. I too was nipped from clay. If you've ever worked with clay, you squeeze off a piece to begin working. You are not overwhelmed by fear of me. My pressure does not weigh heavily on you. Indeed, you have stated in my hearing, I heard the word spoken. I am guiltless, free from transgression. I am innocent, without iniquity. But he, meaning God, finds reason to oppose me, considers me his enemy. He puts my feet in stocks, watches all my ways. So look, you can talk with me, even if you are going on and on that you couldn't open your mouth in front of God. Let's talk us. In this, you are not right. I will answer you. God is greater than any man. Why do you complain against him that he does not reply to any of man's charges? For God speaks time and again, though man does not perceive it. In a dream, a night vision, when deep sleep falls on men, while they slumber on their beds. Then he opens men's understanding, and by disciplining them leaves his signature to turn man away from an action, to suppress pride in man. All right, so we're getting the first glimmers of where Elihu is going and where the book of Job is going. Look, I and you, Job, we're both human, but I can still tell you things that are really important here. And one of those things you need to know is you're not God and you don't understand God. Now, I'm not going to presume to speak for God. I'm not going to tell you how guilty you are and how your punishment is deserved. But I am going to say that we don't understand God. And it's not because God isn't present. It's not because God isn't answering us. It's because the way God answers, most of us are unwilling to hear or feel. So he uses specifically the images here of dreams, of night visions, of a near prophetic experience a person might have when they are not fully conscious. And that in that process, there is this reflection that is meant to occur. There is a deepening of awe and of humility that are meant to grow. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. But just because it doesn't happen doesn't mean God isn't answering. It doesn't mean God isn't there. You may think God is not responding to you, but God has responded, and God responds to all of us constantly. It's just most of the time we don't hear it. Partly because we are all looking for answers the way Job was in the beginning of, I want to know in detail what I did. Stand before me like a court of law, lay out the charges, and I will lay out my defense. And that's not what's going to happen because it's God. You can't stand toe to toe. You're right about that, but understand that God is still present and God is still answering you, just not the questions that you think you want answers for. And this is something, again, like I said, we're going to have to delve very deeply into when we get into a Talmudic section next week. But hold on to that thought, because without the idea that there is some response, you're just going to get more and more angry that Job isn't getting the answer that he wanted. Elihu continues. Do you think it just to say, I am right against God? If you ask how it benefits you, when I have gained, what have I gained from not sinning? Right? So what Elihu is trying to say here is, you're treating this like a transaction. You're saying, I need to be rewarded because I've been good. And if I'm not rewarded, why did I bother being good? And those people that are wicked, they need to be punished. Because if they're not punished, why should anyone not be wicked? Be wicked and get more. And Elihu was saying, that is not the way it works. Right? I shall give you a reply, you along with your friends, meaning the other three bad friends. Behold, look at the heavens and see. Look at the skies high above you. If you sin, what do you do to him? If your transgressions are many, how do you affect him? If you are righteous, what do you give him? What does he receive from your hand? Your wickedness affects men like yourself. your righteousness mortals, right? Being good or bad just affects us. It doesn't affect God. This is not a transactional exchange between mortals and the divine. God is not made better when we are righteous. God is not made worse when we sin. God doesn't punish because he was hurt. He doesn't reward because he was benefited. God is God and wholly different than us. And if you keep treating this like a transaction rather than a true relationship, then yeah, you're going to keep banging your head. You know, if I hire someone to paint my house and they don't paint my house, and then I take them to court to get my money back, we're going to lay out the receipts and we're going to lay out the contract and we're going to talk about all those details. And that'll be perfectly fine because what he did hurt me and what I have done benefited him. And it's unequal because he didn't paint my house. That doesn't work with God. God is not there to answer these petty tit for tat kind of answers because that's not our relationship with God. Instead, have some humility. Because of contention, the oppressed cried out. They shout because of the power of the great, meaning humans. But none say, where is my God, my maker, who gives strength in the night, who gives us more knowledge than the beasts of the earth, makes us wiser than the birds of the sky, right? So look at the oppressed, right? Other people that suffer, Job. Most of them, yeah, they shout, but they're shouting about the way they are being harmed by other people, not by God. But what are they going to say? Oh, God, why are you doing to this? Well, constantly God gives them strength, helps them restore their vigor each morning and be able to face the world again, who gave them a brain that's better than the animals, who allows them to be wise. Well, where did they think that came from? They're yelling at God that something bad has gone wrong, but they're not going to acknowledge the good that God has given them? Are they going to think they deserve that in their transaction, but they didn't deserve the wrong? Do they really think they can open up the account book? No. The most people who are having trouble recognize that their trouble comes from other people, the power of the great, not from God. And that the strength that they actually have, that is what comes from God. The wisdom they have, the ability they have to face their challenges, that comes from God. Then they cry out, but he does not respond in the way they expect because of the arrogance of evil men. Surely it is false that God does not listen, that Shaddai does not take note of it. Though you say, you do not take note of it, the case is before him. So wait for him. But now, since it does not seem so, he vents his anger, shakes fist at clouds. He does not realize that it may be long drawn out. Hence, Job mouths empty words and piles up words without knowledge. Job, you want simple answers to this? Like the most fundamentally difficult problem in all of human existence. You just want a quick answer. Wow, my life is bad now. I want to see the manager. I want to see exactly what went wrong. Show me exactly why this is happening. Come on. Huh? Where are you? No, you're not here, God? Ah, typical. God is not here. God is so unfair. What? God is responding on your timescale? God is going to respond in a way that you acknowledge, just the way that you would treat another human? You really think that's the way this works? You think the relationship between man and God is so trivial that it can be reduced to a simple court case along human terms? This is God, not another person. Give ear to this, Job. Stop to consider the marvels of God. Do you know what charge God lays upon them when his lightning clouds shine? Do you know the marvels worked upon the expanse of clouds by him whose understanding is perfect? Why your clothes become hot when the land is becalmed by the south wind? The splendor of God is awesome. Shaddai, we cannot attain to him. He is great in power and justice and abundant in righteousness. He does not torment. Therefore, men are in awe of him, whom none of the wise can perceive. So this is the transition point in the story of Job. And you'll notice from the ellipses here, this chapter is much, much longer and full of beautiful examples of God's marvelousness in the classic meaning of the word to marvel. That at the end of the day, well, and also at the beginning, we are left in awe. We are left with the realization that we cannot just simply demand an explanation on our terms. We cannot expect a response that is what we would expect from a confrontation with the manager or with a neighbor in the court. That God simply is beyond us. Instead, when we come to that moment of awe and of revelation, when we come to that sense of true humility, that God is not just a super powerful creature that is a reflection of humanity, but is instead something wholly different that the wise not even begin to perceive, then we can begin to understand that the initial question doesn't actually work, that we can't just ask for the account book. We can't just say, show me the receipts. And when that change happens, when we reflect upon God as a relationship between us and Shaddai, between that which is almighty and sufficient, then we can begin to bridge the gap in the relationship without being desperate for some tit-for-tat accounting, like Job has been up to this point. And that's why in chapter 38, Job is now able to hear the response of God. So there are ways of reading this that God has been trying to penetrate to Job, to help him understand, to show him his presence. And Job has been so angry, and he has been so tormented, and he has been so narrow in his demands that he did not hear it, that he did not perceive God's presence. And so now, here at the closing of the book, finally, we get God's response. And again, I warn you, it's not going to be the satisfying response that we thought we wanted back in chapter 3. But it is an incredibly powerful response and more satisfying for that. Although it definitely takes time to marinate. I will personally confess that the first few times I read through the book of Job, it did not feel especially satisfactory to me. I'm hoping I'm making the process easier for everyone else, but if you're not quite there of believing that this book is incredibly insightful and uplifting, well, I certainly understand that. Just don't give up, stay, hear between the lines, understand that there is a response from God here, even if it's not the one that we first wanted. So what does God say in response? Then God replied to Job out of the tempest and said, "Who is this who darkens counsel, speaking without knowledge? Gird your loins like a man," meaning be brave. "I will ask, and you will inform me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Speak if you have understanding. Do you know who fixed its dimensions or who measured it with a line?" And moving on from the astronomical, we eventually get to the natural. "Can you hunt prey for the lion and satisfy the appetite of the king of beasts? They crouch in their dens, lie in ambush in their lairs. Who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wander about without food?" Just think for a second, Job. You want me to defend myself. You think that I will be able to give you an answer that is within your understanding, that is within your capacity to unpack and then say, oh, now it's all neat and clear to me. But you don't understand anything the way God understands the world. You weren't there when God created the world. You don't understand how it is that lions are able to eat and stay in balance with the nature around them, and where the ravens get their food, and how the intricacies of all of the natural world work, from the stars down to the bugs. You don't understand any of that. So how would you dare think that you can understand God's justice, God's actions? You don't understand. 39, he continues from a very beautiful phrase. And I could have chosen any number of excerpts from throughout these chapters. And again, if you want to just marvel at the beauty of the world, just go read these chapters on your own. Do you, Job, do you give the horse its strength? Do you clothe its neck with a mane? Do you make it quiver like locusts? Its majestic snorting, spreading terror. And the quiver like locusts, if you've ever had a horse that you've brushed or combed and seen the skin ripple, it's amazing. And no, we didn't do that. It paws with force, it runs with vigor, charging into battle. It scoffs at fear, it cannot be frightened, it does not recoil from the sword. A quiver full of arrows whizzes by it, the flashing spear and the javelin. Trembling with excitement, it swallows the land, does not turn aside at the blast of the trumpet. As the trumpet sounds, it says, "Aha!" From afar, it smells the battle, the roaring and shouting of the officers. Can you explain the horse, Job? Could you have created the horse? Could you have planned all of existence? No, you couldn't. And that's not because Job is stupid. As we'll see, Job is actually, gets a full thumbs up from God. It's because Job is human. And as such, he cannot even begin to comprehend the nature of the reality in which he lives. But God can. And that means that for there to be a transactional explanation, we are simply looking at too great a gap. For God to explain the details of the running of the universe, humans would have to be God. And well, that doesn't work. So there is going to remain this chasm between us, between our experience and our expectation and God. So God said in reply to Job here in chapter 40, "Shall one who should be disciplined complain against Shaddai? He who arraigns God must respond." So, do you got anything left to say, Job? Do you want to say something to me now? Job said in reply to God, "See, I am of small worth. What can I answer you? I clap my hand to my mouth." Job is now finally quiet. And he's not quiet because he is afraid, necessarily. He's quiet because he's realized there is nothing for him to say, that any demand he makes, any explanation that he seeks, is ultimately going to fail when faced with the truth of God, that God is simply beyond explanation. God cannot be reduced into a platitude or any kind of short description. Now you'll note, Job isn't saying all those people who told me that I deserved my punishment were right. And he's not saying I am guilty and therefore you deserve to do everything against me that happened. He's simply saying, I don't understand. But he's not saying I don't understand, it's not fair. He's saying, just, I don't understand in its totality. That there is no way for me to truly understand what's happening. It feels horrible to me. My friends should be giving me comfort, and I want help, but I'm never going to find a satisfactory explanation. It's never going to be enough because the gulf between me and God is simply too great to truly understand everything that God does. Then God replied to Job out of the tempest, "Gird your loins like a man. I will ask, and you will inform me. Would you impugn my justice? Would you condemn me that you may be right? Who then can stand up to me? Whoever confronts me, I will requite, for everything under the heavens is mine." Right? Would you condemn me so that you could be right? Will you say God is corrupt, that God is broken, just so you can feel better about yourself? Is that the solution that you're looking for, Job? Because for most of the last 30 chapters, that has been kind of where you were headed, with the idea that if I don't understand it, it must be wrong. If I don't get it, God must be evil. And God is saying, really? It has to be understandable by you? If you don't understand it, then you must be in the right and I'm in wrong, because there's nothing I could do that would be perfectly fair and right unless you could understand it. Anybody who's ever had a child will know that sometimes you reach points like this, where small child, say 5, 6, 7, 8 years old sometimes, will think it is completely unfair that there is a bedtime, that they have to go to the dentist, that they are getting a vaccine, And as a parent, sometimes it can be a little frustrating of, you think as a 5-year-old you know better than me that you don't need a bedtime, or that you need to eat your vegetables, or whatever else it might be. I mean, really? And because you don't understand it, and maybe lack the vocabulary, and maybe I'm not doing a great job of explaining it, because as a human, I'm certainly more limited than God in that capacity. But just because you don't get the idea, therefore I'm a terrible parent, I'm evil. Really? That's what God is trying to help Job understand. Just because we don't understand doesn't make it broken, doesn't make it evil, doesn't make it unjust. And that's a very, very hard pill for most of us to swallow. We have spent the better part of the last 200 years, at least, and a few centuries prior to that, in Western civilization, fighting against power that would say, trust me, I'm the king. Anything I say must be right because I'm the king. And of our other institutions as well, we have seen their corruption. And so whenever somebody says, you don't understand, but it's not wrong that this happens, we naturally rebel, as we should, against humans. Humans have to be able to justify their behavior to the rest of us. That we're humans, as Elihu said, we're pinched from the same clay. We need to be able to talk to one another, and we need to be able to justify each other in order for there to be justice. But God is God, and that is a whole different scale. And as frustrating as it is to those of us who were raised with this sense of transparency and of equality, and of if it's not reasonable to the general people, then it's not reasonable at all. It is very frustrating to realize that there is actually a point beyond which that argument doesn't work, and that's called the divine. That we do trail off in our capacity to understand. We do falter at that final step of comprehension. And while we can force each other to be held accountable, we can't expect that same from God. And yet we stay in relationship. We look for strength when we sleep. We look for guidance. We look for inspiration. We look for wisdom to handle our problems and to overcome. We look for the guidance of each other to help each other when individuals are in crisis. But if we're expecting there to be a simple unrolling of the blueprints of creation, that we will be able to see precisely where our suffering fits into God's great plan, then we will always come up short. And if we use that as an excuse to reject God, and to then say, therefore, God is so unfair, because there's no possible explanation for any of this that I can think of, then what does that do for all that we are trying to do that actually does bring peace, justice, and goodness to the world? If we turn away from God completely, then we end up becoming monsters that multiply the suffering of ourselves and each other. So we are put into this, for the modern world, very much in particular, but even as you can see here in the ancient world, it was difficult position of saying, I am required to struggle and fight for what is right in the human world to the best of my ability, and to not accept a hand wave of, it must be fair if the government's throwing you in jail, because that is not acceptable. The government has to make its case, and we have to hold it responsible. But when it comes to God and all of creation, we recognize that God is the one that measured the universe with a handspan, and we are not. And therefore, we will never completely be able to understand it. We'll come back to that little caveat of completely when we get into the Talmud next week. But let's finish up with what happens to Job at the end of this book. Job said in reply to God, I know that you can do everything, that nothing you propose is impossible for you. Who is this who obscures counsel without knowledge? Indeed, I spoke without understanding of things beyond me, which I did not know. Hear now, and I will speak. I will ask, and you will inform me. I had heard you with my ears, but now I see you with my eyes. Therefore I recant and relent, being but dust and ashes. I thought I understood. but now I see. And seeing as a poetic form is always considered superior to hearing. And now I understand that I know nothing. I am dust and ashes. Who am I? What could I possibly say to truly challenge your justice and your rightness? I don't know. So my attack upon you, God, I recount. I still deny that I am a wicked person that deserves to be punished. But I will not say that what is happening to me negates you. God is still God, despite the tragedy that I suffer. I don't have to accept that I deserve it. I don't have to blame myself for it. I don't have to feel guilt. And I certainly don't have to put up with self-righteous, sanctimonious friends who tell me it's all my own fault. But I also am not going to say God is evil for doing this to me. Instead, I'm going to work to hear God, to hear a path forward, and to work with each other to heal what is going wrong rather than to blame. After God had spoken these words to Job, God said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am incensed at you and your two friends, the three that have been there since the beginning, but not Elihu, who got Job back on the right path. For you have not spoken the truth about me, as did my servant Job. Remember, they were defending God. God is perfect. God is always just. God punishes the wicked. He helps the righteous. And God is telling them, how could you have lied like that? To think that you can interpret every action in the world and know my will. How dare you? That was the ultimate lie that was happening here. Job was wrong, but Job was just mistaken. I mean, he was angry, and that is prone to makes us prone to mistakes. But Job was basically just angry. These guys calmly and coldly tried to defend God by lying and saying that everything bad that happens is deserved in a way that we as humans can understand. They failed to understand God's incomprehensibility, but rather than railing against God, they used it as a way to punish their neighbor, to insult and to shame their friend by saying, you deserve it, because I know what God wants. I know what God does. And if you're suffering, it must be because you are evil. That is the ultimate crime that God is angry about here. And now they are the only ones that are being required to actually make amends. Now, take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job. Job is their servant, even though he was the one angry. He's the one who truly serves God, unlike these three, and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. And let Job, my servant, pray for you, for to him I will show favor and not treat you vilely. Meaning, if he is willing to forgive you, then I will forgive you, but you have to be sincere, since you have not spoken the truth about me, as did my servant Job. Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamathite went and did as God had told them, and God showed favor to Job. God restored Job's fortunes when he prayed on behalf of his friends. And God gave Job twice what he had before. All his brothers and sisters and all his former friends came to him and had a meal with him in his house. They consoled and comforted him for all the misfortune that God had brought upon him. He gave him 1 casita, and each one gave him 1 casita and each 1 gold ring. Thus God blessed the latter years of Job's life more than the former. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 jennies, a type of donkey. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Afterward, Job lived 140 years to see 4 generations of children and grandchildren. So Job died and was contented. A whole lot to unpack in the very last paragraph of this book. So first of all, Job's fortunes change when he prays on behalf of his friends. It is incredibly difficult for somebody going through this kind of grief to be confronted by friends like this, but to realize that they do not speak for God, that they in fact are shaming God's name, and to pray that they will be able to understand God better, while you are also recognizing your inability to understand God, is an incredibly powerful thing. To be able to say, wow, you just said something stupid and hurtful to me. I pray to God that you will learn how to help somebody in need. that's the beginning of the turn for Job. That's where he begins to rebuild his life. At this point, up to this point, he was only anger and hate. And now he is forgiving his friends for their frailty because he realizes that it is a different version of his own inability to understand God. Their inability is more hateful and hurtful than his own anger, but it is from the same cause, the same source, that understanding God is ultimately beyond human capacity. And therefore, Job begins to rebuild his life. It is also very telling and painful to read that his family show up and all of his former friends only when things are starting to get better. And now they are giving consolation because of what he had going on before. But at least in the process of doing so, they are actually helping him rebuild. By giving him the additional funds, they are the instrument through which God is bringing blessing. They are not sitting back and saying, well, if God wants him to suffer, then I guess we should let him suffer. They're saying, wow, he's calmed down a little bit and he's not so angry and just explosive. So why don't I go and see if I can help? And they do. They show up, they help, and materially his blessings are multiplied. He has apparently new children. There's many discussions in the Midrash exactly about where the 7 and 3 daughters came from. Most do seem to believe that these are new children. Not necessarily that takes away the pain of the ones that were lost, but it does mean that he is not completely bereft of children for his life. Because Job, unlike the wicked that we mentioned in earlier rhetorical conversation, does actually want his family to thrive. He wants his children to be well and happy. Job is a good man. And when he allows himself to come down from the anger and from the hate and from the screaming rage, which was his right, but when he comes down, he is able to try and build a family again, build a life again, and is maybe even able to see that despite his 3 terrible friends, there are some good friends still around him, and that he does still have family that are willing to help him, and that his life can go on, because what happened to him was not his fault. It was not because he was bad. And that means there is hope, that there is something for him to reach for. Now, like I said a little while ago, this is not the satisfying answer that most modern readers want from the book of Job. Most of us want a nice formula. We want things laid out in a rubric of explanation that lets us interpret the world around us, because it is incredibly frustrating to see people that are good suffer and people that are wicked thrive. And it does lead many people away from God. It does lead people into not just atheism, but anti-theism, meaning full opposition to the concept of God at all. Fortunately, that then creates many other effects that will only exacerbate the suffering around us. But likewise, the book of Job tells us that false piety and false defense of God, as though all that happens is easily understood, is so problematic, and creates many of the institutions that we had to rebel against in order to try and have more freedom and rights in the modern world. So, how does our tradition try to put this together from all of the disparate pieces of our text? How does it stitch together the different quotes and passages and ideas that are scattered throughout the Tanakh and put them into a cohesive theology? Well, first of all, it doesn't, meaning Judaism was not known for putting together a systemic theological explanation a la Aquinas or many of the other medieval writers. Eventually, we do get some, such as Rambam and others, but we're going to look at the older strata first, and that is in the Talmud. And we're going to dig through a piece of the Talmud that tries to make sense of all of this in a more systemic way, less rhetorical, more theological, meaning like simple statements, and more case studies from their own lives, which are post-biblical, and as such have a different feel to them for those of us who live outside the world of the Bible. But we will leave that for next week. Thank you for accompanying me on our fight through the book of Job. Like I said, this is a bare skeleton of the beauty of the book. And if you read it in its entirety and with a good commentary or two or three, perhaps eventually you'll come to recognize its beauty as well. Take care, everyone, and be well.